Thanks, Don. Thank you so much. And all the panelists that presented tonight. You know, what Don just shared about, you know, in the broader picture, historically, geographically, you know, everything that was shared up here. Mac had shared about, you know, the experience of being in war. And I know his friend Brian wants to say something. And we're going to get, and basically the way I figured that we're going to do this is people are going to get to talk. You guys want to say, anybody has something to say, you raise your hand, you get to say something. We'll give you a couple, two minutes or whatever. But if you have a specific question for somebody, you can ask it, but don't feel that you have to, because this is a teach-in for all of us. You know, we just wanted to have, you know, this event so that we could bring out, you know, the information. And there's debate to be had, there's discussion to be had. So I hope we can do it in a civil way if there is, you know, different opinions. And, you know, if anybody wants to say anything, raise your hand, and I will come over to you. We'll try to work it pretty quick.
I was very impressed by what everyone said. And I have to say that the last point that was made, the last 3 points that were made actually, you know, about the imminence of a possible war by design or accident, makes me think that we really have to proceed on a 3-point program real quickly. The first one is pull our forces back from the brink and just have a people's uprising that dwarfs what happened with Syria, the Syrian situation, be in the streets everywhere, including Long Island, to prevent that from happening. I remember that being done in 1979 with Iran. I remember it being done later, and this year with Syria. So with Ukraine and Russia. Second point, real quickly, I was always raised to think that revolution in one country was doomed to failure. Okay, these people in Donetsk and Kharkiv and elsewhere can't be hung out to dry. And the next almost simultaneous step has to be, I think, just across the board support for them. And the third, of course, turning to our own country and making sure that the forces in this country that favor the reversal, you know, the reversal of this horrendous larceny by the less than 1%, which is making this happen, that be reversed. And I don't think there can be a long period of time between these steps. I just, somehow they have to be simultaneous. I think.
Thank you, Barry. And this man here had something to say?
Hello. I'd like to hear something about the road to peace. What would be some proposals to make peace in these conditions right now? Thank you.
Okay. We'll get the panel. Okay, that's good, good. Yes, I know, Brian, you wanted to say something? If they like, yes. If you want to introduce yourself, that'll be fine.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my name is Brian Matarese, and like Mac, I'm a longtime member of Vietnam Veterans Against the War. It was kind of interesting to hear Sarah talk about troops refusing to fight. You know, we're not going in, they, you know, took the magazines out and just didn't fight. This year is the 100th anniversary of the Christmas truce in World War I. Now, what the Christmas truce was, soldiers on the Western Front, French, German, English, on Christmas declared a truce. The soldiers, not the officers, not the officer corps. They laid down their weapons for a day. They went out, they had meals together, they played soccer. Unfortunately, the war started up again because the officers threatened everybody with court-martials and whatever else. But it was a historic moment during the war. And what we're doing this year, and we're having a meeting May 17th in New York, we're calling together all veterans groups, and later on, as soon as we establish what we're going to do, we're going to reach out to every other group possible to celebrate this historic occasion and mark it for what it was, a time where soldiers said, well, we're not going to fight, and they didn't. And if anyone wants more information, they can go to the Vets for Peace website or the New York City Veterans Peace Council, and you'll get more information on it. The meeting is May 17th, And the address, which I don't have offhand, will be on those websites, okay? Or you can go to the VVAW one also, and you'll find more information. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anybody else that had something to say? Or we could have, okay, sorry, here we go. I feel like Phil Donahue.
Yes, I just wanted to back up a minute. We talked about the big picture. There's a number of things going on that I think a lot of people are not aware of and that the media has not disclosed, although some of them you may know. Russia is in the process of negotiating a huge deal for energy with the Chinese, oil and gas. And they're also in the process of negotiating a huge deal for the same with Japan, a 20-year deal in which they're going to run tremendous gas pipelines to Japan. It's very significant, I think, that the Europeans have virtually told Obama they're not going to slap on sanctions. And the only sanctions that have been slapped on today, either way, are some that are almost meaningless for these countries. The Soviet Union is negotiating to send their energy elsewhere, and Europe in the future is going to desperately need that energy. As for the Ukraine, the question is still is in my mind, why the Ukraine, why now? The Soviet Union collapsed in December of 1991. The entire Soviet Union was a basket case, along with Ukraine, economically. And they have been virtually ever since. And I wouldn't call it Russian largesse that's kept them afloat. Russia had its reasons for giving them money and for giving them discounted energy prices. But they did that. When the Soviet Union broke up, Russia was left with the vast majority of resources, particularly oil and gas. The countries that broke off had next to nothing. So the question, when this first came up, I said, why is the West and Russia fighting over a basket case? Another Greece, another Spain, another Italy. And I still am not sure that the answer to that question. All that's going to be required now is an endless stream of money poured into the Ukraine. The Ukraine it was corrupt before it broke off. It was corrupt when it broke off. It's still corrupt today, both East and West Ukraine, and both are going to require tremendous amounts of money. Ironically, the Soviet Union, Russia has already sunk more money in the Ukraine than it can ever logically expect to be paid back, until today. Today, Russia can say, well, the West is going to have to pick up the bill for all of what Ukraine owes us, which is a huge amount of money. Otherwise, Ukraine's in default. So the question in my mind is why? Why are these two powers? Is Putin actually pulling a fast one here and figures he's going to end up with his naval base on the Black Sea, and the West is going to get to bail out the Ukraine from now forward for as long as it takes with money they don't have?
Thank you. Anybody else have anything to add, or if anybody on the panel wants to say? Don? You can address it.
Just to answer that first while it's fresh. I'm speculating, of course. But you brought up a couple of interesting points that kind of lead to one answer. In the previous period, when you had competition between the Western Bloc and the USSR, you also had this strong ideological diversion, cleavage between the two. And so there was no way for the Soviet Union to make an appeal to the elites in France, for example, that, why don't you play on our team instead of theirs? Because their team meant essentially you reorganize your economy, your elite gets dispossessed of its power and influence, and you wouldn't have a mirror image of our society. Ultimately, in any event, that's the fullest expression of that kind of relationship. That doesn't exist now. Now you're looking at one model of global capitalism that's, full of contradictions and exhausted in some ways, and another that's rising, that's sitting on top of all of these resources, that geographically, for example, is much more efficient to ship gas and oil to Japan from Russia, from Siberia, than it is from, shale in Pennsylvania or whatever. So there are all kinds of things that militate towards a restructuring of the alliances, if it's allowed to, come to fruition, if it's allowed to, fulfill itself. That is an objective reality that I think all of the players are aware of. And that is looming pretty heavily, and we've seen some major developments along that line over the last year or two. When they had the little crisis with the debt ceiling and stuff here, you heard noises about creating currency. There's been development banks and other projects that would look at deeper integration of another global model across the board that can compete. So I think some folks here are looking at this time as being, close to the precipice of a real competition crisis, and so it may well be that that's what's driving it. That's my opinion.
I wanted to address a couple of the questions. First, we need a three-point plan, and the first point being pull back U.S. forces, and link that to the point about what's the road to peace. The sentiment is overwhelmingly against another war, and it doesn't matter how they do the polls. You ask people, you want war with Ukraine? No. For any reason at all, overwhelmingly. Syria? No. At the time, 89% of the population against a war with Syria. Now, we may not get to decide, though, because next time they may not leave it to a congressional vote. Certainly, past wars, there's suddenly a rush and a congressional vote. We could go back to the Gulf of Tonkin or remember the Maine or so on. But it's important to know that overwhelmingly the population in the U.S. is against another war. By no matter what majority, what poll. This is also true in Europe, overwhelmingly. Now, who pays? Who pays if there's a bailout of the Ukraine? That's another thing we should take up. We always say we, but we, you and me, pay that 10 billion, that 50 billion, that 500 billion for the military war machine. But Wall Street and the military industries, they profit. They don't pay a penny. They only pull it in. War for them is good business. And so they don't look at it as costing. They look at it as earning big, big bucks. They're also seeking to change a balance that they are unable to change. This is an empire in decline and decay. It may have 1,000 bases around the world, but it no longer has the economic, productive capacity. And so it's trying to rebalance that with a lot of threats. That's very dangerous. Now, just look at the oil and gas and a lot of other products that come from Russia. There's $350 billion in trade between the EU and Russia. U.S. has $23 billion. So the EU has 15 times as much trade, 15 times as much trade with Russia as the U.S. does. And Wall Street wants to stop that. They want to rebalance that. And they want to use the same tactics that they're using to sanction Iran. And they want to use military threats and political threats. Will Europe respond? It doesn't look like they are. They keep pushing, we got to sanction. They say, yes, blah, blah, blah. Let's kick the can further down the road. Let's postpone this, So at any rate, there's the one destabilizing force in all this is the only military is NATO. And a real provocation is really possible. So it is why, if we're serious, we need to mobilize again to be a political force on the ground that can't be ignored.
Thank you. Sure, Heather.
The question about this is loud. The question about what to do is, first of all, one of the things is you did it. You're here. You know, this was announced, it wasn't a big thing. We got it on the radio, we gave it out at Nassau Community College, Brian and, you know, leafleted here and stuff, and 40 people came out. And that's a very significant thing. I wish I saw more young people. That's a difficult situation. They don't want war. I teach young people. Barry teaches young people. I mean, they don't want a war, but they don't know that you can actually get yourself in motion to help stop a war. So that's very important for us to do for our children and our grandchildren. That's really important. And I want to tell you that one of the things, I'm an organizer for the May 1st Coalition for Worker and Immigrant Rights in New York, and this is our 10th year of having a march in New York City from Union Square. I urge you all to come down. However, I also urge you to, if you can't come to New York City at Union Square, there's going to be, and I'm going to ask, is Carlos Canales still here? No, he left. We have the card. Oh, okay. Then I'll tell, give me a card. But what we decided to do in the May 1st Coalition is to have an anti-war contingent for this very reason, because we saw this war as a potential and a terrifying thing. And the UNAC, United National Anti-War Coalition, is going to be carrying banners and placards in the march on Thursday, May 1st, because in fact, there's nothing worse for workers and poor people and immigrants and everybody than war. And so we need to bring these issues together. I mean, one of the things about this that gives us some potential is because this really does pull all the issues together. My daughter has a 2-year-old, she's going to be 2 next week. I have a 2-year-old granddaughter. She goes to a wonderful daycare center, the daycare center that her mom went to and actually worked at when she was older. This is considered was the best daycare center in Nassau. They're closing. And they're closing because the federal government made a determination that poor people, if they made more than $30,000, like $31,002, which is the situation for many, then they would not get any assistance. So they're closing the daycare center, and this is happening all over the country. All young people who have children are not being able to send their children to daycare centers if they're rich enough to make $33,000. You know, I mean, so that in fact daycare centers are closing. Sarah mentioned that they're cutting back on food stamps. They're cutting back on everything. So this is bringing the issues of the people of this country who are facing austerity. We are facing privatization of our schools and of our prisons and of the post office and everything. We are facing this together, and the United States says we need more money for war when they spent $1.2 trillion on war, and that was only in 2012. It's up now. That's the only game that capitalists have, is to play another war. So I really, when I said before we need an anti-war movement fast, I actually think that there's going to be a march on Long Island. That's the 1st of May as well. It's in Hempstead. It's against the deportations that have now, there are more under the Obama administration than there were under Bush. 2 million, 1,100 a day people are being deported. There are jails with babies inside of them in Texas. I mean, it's a horrendous thing. We are facing something which some people think is like fascism in this country. So it is really imperative that we organize, that we march, that we carry signs. We should be, going to some federal things in front of a poster office or wherever and saying no war in Ukraine, no war against Russia, no war. And, if we did that when we were younger, well, all right, it didn't go away. It only got worse. So we have to, get ourselves together and do it some more and, feel
Yes.
we can do it.
Thank you. I just Mac had something else you wanted to add?
Look, it's just, we've been doing this a long time, and it gets frustrating. We keep waging this struggle for peace, and we see war after war, perpetual war. It gets frustrating, but we keep the struggle. We keep on going. Well, we demonstrate, we write letters, we get arrested, we civil disobedient, we do all this crap, and yet war is still going on. So you can understand how frustrating it gets. But we need to continue. And at this point in my life, I've decided that the only inroad we can make is with the kids. We have to get into the schools. It wasn't long ago in the 90s, every time a recruiter was in the schools, we were there. We were always invited to counter the recruiter. They wanted to hear our side too. But ever since No Child Left Behind thing, the schools are intimidated that they're going to lose their funding. So they don't ask us to come into the schools. We're never invited any longer to hear. So they hear one side. The recruiters are constantly in the school. These junior ROTCs are constantly influencing these kids. They're militarizing our children. And we don't have the opportunity to get in there and at least educate them about the realities of it. Look, I don't care if people want to join the military. You want to join the military, go ahead. But you have to go with an open eyes. You have to know what's going on. I remember demonstrating in front of a Marine Corps recruiter one time, and it was a summer day, so I had so they saw my kids were coming in, they saw my tattoo. So I asked the kid, I said, well, why are you joining the Marine Corps? He looked at me and he said, because I want a tattoo like that. It's cool with the chicks. So these kids, 17, 18 years old, they have no concept, no idea of what it is they're getting themselves in for. And you can bet your life they're not going to tell them that. They're not going to tell them the truth about war, the nature of war. We don't want that to happen. We want them to go blindly, and then hopefully later on they get killed or they commit suicide, and they're no longer a burden to our country. So we need to get into the schools. So if you know someone, if you can get us into the schools, let us know. We need to get out there. We need to educate people. That's the avenue to peace. Demonstrations are wonderful, but we've been doing it for 100 years, and we still haven't solved it. We've been arrested a million times. It doesn't work. They just put you in jail. Walter just came out of jail about twice already in the last 6 months. Civil disobedience. Let's hear it for Walter. VFP. So let's get into the schools. Let's work on the kids. Those are the minds we have to change.
Thanks, Mac. Thank you so much. And there are videos on the Long Island Vets for Peace website of presentations at schools that have been that are really great. Anybody? We have so many friends came tonight. I'm so happy that people came and the panelists shared all their information. Billy, do you want to say anything? Because I know you have some information. Why don't you speak about that, please?
I don't have the website in front of me, but can people hear me? Was the issue of the use of tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine by Russia and potentially by the United States addressed? And who has control over those? Because I know at least in Russia, it's not Putin. It's Putin, but it goes way down to lower level officers. I don't know if that's inclusive of the United States or not. But this is what happened during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and it's a miracle anybody's still here.
You're talking about who has control of the tactical weapons.
And also the whole issue of nuclear power plants in Ukraine, too. There are 4 plants,
Chernobyl, right?
15 reactors.
Right.
Yeah, yesterday was the 28th anniversary of that.
Well, see, you have to look also at the larger picture with those. The United States would be happy, or at least should be happy, to do away with nuclear weapons if the Russians would also, because the United States has overwhelming conventional force. The United States could overrun Russia in 10 minutes without, well, they think, until they run into some Russians, without nuclear weapons. The Russians need the nuclear weapons for defense. And so the use of nuclear weapons outside of a black op, like could happen by the West, would be foolish. And the use of a nuclear weapon there would probably be more readily believed by the public to have come from the Russians because of their actual need to use them to defend themselves at some point. So the command and control over even the troops in Ukraine is a question right now. They issue orders from Kiev, and the soldiers change the flags on their tanks. So who has control of the tactical nuclear weapons there? I'm sure no one knows, unless provisions were made for this kind of scenario in advance by both Russia and the United States.
I read some of the Russian military doctrine 3 or 4 days ago, and it says it's lower level officers have the initiative illegally on their own.
You're talking about Russians.
Russia's.
Yeah.
And I mentioned the United States.
talking
and
about Ukraine.
I don't think it included lower-level U.S. officers, but I'm not positive.
No. Well, put it this way, any use of nuclear weapons by the United States, lower level or not, handbook or not, is going to be from the top. That's not necessarily Obama, the real top.
Yeah.
But on the Russian side, it makes sense for them to have to delegate to the command level, to the field command level, because if they were decapitated in either a nuclear or non-nuclear strike, which the U.S. has done in other cases, then they would either have wasted the time on those weapons and wasted their use, or in other words, they're not available. And so the retaliatory capacity and even the deterrent capacity of them would require that there's a command, field command level authority to use them.
The one other thing I wanted to mention was just the nuclear power plants there. There are 4 plants with 15 reactors, tons of waste. This is where Chernobyl took place in Ukraine. And there have been threats since at least January 30th to sabotage the nuclear power plants. Now, I spoke Friday with a guy that used to be in the State Department named Bennett Ramberg, who wrote a book called Nuclear Power Plants as Weapons for the Enemy, an Unrecognized Military Peril. And there's certain people that know about this that are quite alarmed, but in the media, at least in this country, it's virtually absent. I look at some of the foreign media, I've seen nothing. And I missed the beginning of the meeting, so I don't know if that was addressed or not. But I wanted to mention one excellent website for that, enenews.com.
I mean, the answer is I don't know to that, but I did want to just address something that I didn't before with this gentleman here, actually, and I think you're absolutely right that in terms of what would be a fair path to peace in Ukraine, I think is beyond the scope of what we can do here, other than to make sure that our government doesn't enforce anything on the Ukrainian people or on that entire region. It has no damn business doing it, and really we've been terribly derelict in our job, allowing them to prowl the planet like a hungry cat or something. What we need to be doing, there's some suggestions here, is perhaps starting some fires behind the lines. For example, 40 people. Is there a town in Long Island within a 10-minute drive here where you could occupy town hall somewhere and fly up a flag for the media of solidarity with Donetsk? I mean, that would have a huge impact if you could get it out there. And likewise, I live in Westchester. It's occurring to me the same thing. We could grab 20 or 30 people and go take over Austin Town Hall and fly a Russian flag or the flag of the People's Republic of Donetsk. Starting political fires and instability here, where they have to start worrying about what we're going to do next instead of worrying about what's happening back there, is the only chance we have of restraining them at all. And with all of the dissent that exists just below the surface here, we saw manifestations of it. How long did it take for Occupy to ignite to hundreds of cities here? It's there, and that's only the kids of the middle class, essentially. All of the oppressed people here, traditionally, black folks, brown folks, poor folks generally. If we gave a couple of little sparks in some places with groups of 10, 20, 30 people and made sure that people saw it on YouTube or whatever, we could start a fire that would make them bring their toys home and pay attention to what's going on here. And I think unless we do that, the rest of it is just academic.
I don't want to get Germany off the hook. I'm glad everybody who is American in here is all ready to go and, fight for the peace and everything else. I will start first with a question. Anybody remembers the man with the mustache in here like this and the hair going like this? So, pardon my German. Drang nach Osten für Lebensraum. In English, that says, push towards the east for the living space. Helmut Kohl is the direct administrative heir to Adolf Hitler. Direct administrative heir to Adolf Hitler. He was the very first to start creeping with the influence and the NATO countries towards the east after the reunification. Schroeder, the chancellor after him, was doing the same thing. Merkel is a little bit better. Nevertheless, the very powerful, forces going Drang nach Osten, are in Germany. We are their military might, and their, the interest of theirs is to get as much as they get towards the east.
Thank you. I was thinking, when we were preparing for this forum, that the peace movement was right about Vietnam, and the peace movement was right about Central America, and the peace movement was right about Afghanistan, and right about Iraq. That all the rhetoric for war, turns out to have been debunked, by the peace movement. We had talked earlier about, 12 years ago, whenever we were marching, millions of people against the war, February 15th, 2003, the millions of people, and all the evidence and the information that was brought out at that time turns out to have been right on. Iraq was going to be a quagmire, Afghanistan was going to be a quagmire, the situation was, pretty much predicted by just people, coming out with, their own understanding, and knew that the lies, were exactly lies. But now it seems like it's a little bit, fuzzier because, it's a Democrat president, and, we've been, told, painted that it's, it's resurgent Russia, Putin is Hitler, Putin is Stalin, and they just get it like, Kerry is selling the war now instead of Rumsfeld, so it's a mind manipulation that goes on, in the media, and for, the people here, I'm grateful that we have had the opportunity to bring this discussion out and to bring it, as everywhere we can, just to get the, the information, the truth, that people know in their hearts. Cities like Detroit are, the victims of war as much as, these other places around the world that, poverty is enforced. And the perfect analogy of, $8 billion for the Ukraine while you're cutting $8 billion in food stamps is like an equal sign, so it's right there. It's no denying. And as the conditions here do deteriorate, to continue that, to bring it to people, do not support this. Do not support this, sleepwalking into Ukraine, and through NATO. NATO being, the shield, like where, it's not just the U.S., it's, these, NATO alliance, So we have anybody else that wants to say their 2 cents? Because certainly, that's why we came tonight. Anybody, oh, good, Terry, thank you.
When in the last days of the Bush administration, I was counting the days because I was saying, oh, he could do something crazy, but Obama's going to come in and everything's going to be fine. And it didn't turn out that way. And I think that we can't hope much from the next Democratic candidate unless we help choose him. So I would hope that somebody like Dennis Kucinich, somebody with national stature, would start talking now about the dangers of this conflict in the Ukraine, and I think we can encourage them. I keep getting, I'm on Kucinich's mailing list. He keeps asking me for money. I'm going to send him and say, why don't you speak out? I might give you some money if you speak out.
We did pass around the pad that had people interested in taking part in some further actions, and also the meeting that's going to be on the teach-in, if you want to speak about that.
Yeah, we're going to have a teach-in at Riverside Church on Saturday, May 10th, and it's a very good, serious lineup of speakers. There'll be Ramsey Clark, Glenn Ford, Ray McGovern, speakers also on quite a number of issues. Syrian American Forum, Bernard White will be there. I'll be speaking. At any rate, also from the Bolivaran Circle, William Kamakaro. So I do want to encourage folks coming out Saturday, May 10th. It's organized by International Action Center, but with a lot of support from other groups and a lot of participation. And I think we're going to try to have it live streamed, try to get it around with a lot of material. By the way, there's also a chronology over there on that table, or maybe it's
I
up
think we
here
need some
now.
more, yes. There were some of
And,
these that needed to go around.
It's just a few facts. It's helpful. There's some pamphlets, The Ukraine Threat, U.S. NATO-backed fascist coup, and the growing people's resistance. There's some of those over there. So let's continue. Let's stay in touch. Let's figure out next steps, and also know that it's dangerous and becoming more dangerous. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, really want to thank Charlotte Sky is here. And I want to thank Charlotte so much because, she and the people here at the cinema, are great to have us here. And so I want to, again, remind everybody to support the cinema, become a member, publicize the events that go on here, and, continue to help the work. I mean, where else could we have this event? And does anybody have anything else that they want to share about, what they may have learned, or any other questions before we break it up? Yes.
Just an invitation. I keep doing this at every gathering here, and it doesn't work that much, but that is, I teach at Nassau Community College, as I think Heather said, if no other venue is available, I open all my classes to anyone who wants to speak on these vital issues. And I'll give Brian and give others, my email. And the semester's almost ending. It will be ending on 19th of May. But rolling into the fall, when these issues will still be there, I really welcome people from this group who might want to come and dialogue with my students and with other people's students. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Barry. Thank you again, Sarah and Heather and Mac and Don. And Don, good, please.
I just want to let people know, Bernard White and I started an internet radio station in December of 2011. We just finished our 2-year anniversary this past December, and Bernard does a 3-hour daily program, Emanations, live. I do a 3-hour daily morning program, and I produce a half-hour news program Monday through Friday. It's on about 30 radio stations around the country right now, covering all of this stuff in depth with things you're not hearing anywhere else, a lot of it not even on Pacifica. I'm sorry, how do you get there? CPRmetro.org. CPR as in Community Progressive Radio, CPRmetro.org.
CPRmetro.org.
Yep.
Yes, anybody else have anything? It's in Hempstead. We have cards for that. I'm not sure where's... Fulton Avenue in Hempstead, May 1st. Yeah, May Day. Thank you all for coming. Really appreciate it. Thank you. We'll do more. Thanks again.